Hi everybody, welcome to Natural Health Practices. I'm Megan Wagner. I'm an associate practitioner here at the office, and today we're going to be having looks like a mini cooking show. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, and that is bone broth. I know some of you are already like, bone broth? Why would we talk about that? Some of you are like, yeah, bone broth, we love bone broth. So let's have a good chat and use this video to understand why I love bone broth, why I encourage people to make bone broth, the health benefits of bone broth, and how it can improve your life. I'm really excited. This is one of my favorite topics to teach. So hang tight and let's get into the nitty-gritty. I do want to let you guys know how I came to find bone broth as a part of my life. As many of you know, I had some really serious health issues. I was born with a genetic immunodeficiency disease called common variable immunodeficiency disease. It's a mouthful, and it really impacted my life and the quality of my life. So throughout childhood and young adulthood, I was really suffering. I had a lot of stomach issues. I was on a ton of medications. I was diagnosed with so many autoimmune diseases and different issues. I mean, honestly, you guys, I was a hot mess. I was absolutely miserable. Luckily for me, my mom was a saint, and she would drive me to every physician you could think of. We went to specialists at renowned universities. We went to Eastern medicine practitioners, acupuncturists, functional medicine doctors. And about 12 or so years ago, we started working with a functional medicine doctor who really was doing her best to fight to figure out what was really wrong with me. How can we start to heal? And she recommended that we start something called the specific carbohydrate diet. It's also known a little bit as the GAPS diet. It's very similar to the paleo diet. I talk about those things a lot. But the difference with this diet is that it incorporates bone broth or bone stocks as an everyday thing when you're starting off the diet. And the reason that is to heal the gut. So this woman, this practitioner, she had me start this diet, and my mom was awesome and helped me, and we were making soups all the time and different bone broth recipes. And I really started to notice some big differences with my gut. I was eating so much better. In combination between that diet and nutrition response testing, I really feel like those things absolutely saved my life. As you can see, I'm an adult, I'm functional, I'm a pretty happy person. I really feel so lucky to have been able to heal myself through food and through good nutrition, and I'm committed to helping you guys do the same thing. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm passionate about everything that we do at this office. And it's also why I'm really passionate and excited to teach this workshop about bone broth. So we're gonna kind of start off here a little bit. First, I wanna make sure that we're all on the same page of what bone broth actually is. Sometimes the word gets tossed around and people think it's soup, people think it's just like a stock or a bouillon. They don't really know. People don't really know what the difference is. So I'm gonna just let you know that bone broth is a stock or liquid that is made by simmering animal bones for an extended amount of time. Sometimes that's a couple of hours and sometimes it's days, okay? Bone broth can vary depending on how you're making it, who you're making it for, what kind of recipe, all of that fun stuff. Now for some of you, like I said before, I know some people get freaked out thinking about just bones simmering in water. But have you ever made a whole chicken? Have you ever made chicken soup and you use a whole chicken, or maybe you use chicken thighs or chicken breast with the bone in it? Or maybe you've made a stew and you use a cut of beef that has the bone in it. And you'll notice when you do that, when you have an animal product that still has the bone in it, that the flavor is just unbelievable. It's rich, it tastes so much better. People tend to go for those cuts of meats when they're trying to make certain dishes, when they're trying to make a great stew or a certain type of soup. And that is the concept of bone broth, okay? It doesn't have to just be bones, although that is what we're gonna be talking about primarily today, and how you can incorporate that into other things. But if you've done any of the things I just mentioned, you've basically had bone broth. I know that my grandmother's generation and her parents and all the way back, people used bone broth constantly. It was a staple in everyone's diet, and they would always make different stocks and soups and gravies, and they were always trying to make sure they didn't let animal parts go to waste. So they were utilizing those things to make nutritious food. Now, the next question I get a lot is about the history of bone broth. So like I just said, it reminds me of like my grandmother's generation and her parents' generation, maybe some of you too. But really, bone broth goes back thousands of years, okay? There are so many records of bone broth use. There are records of ancient cultures boiling the bones of wild game. Native Americans traditionally would prepare bone broths by lining baskets with clay so that they could boil water and arrange the bones of wild game inside of them. Chicken and fish broths are featured in the traditional cooking of most Asian cultures. So again, that's thousands of years back. Long simmering bone broths made from beef marrow are literally the base of many traditional Korean dishes. In medieval times, there was a tradition that the innkeeper would keep a pot of soup, sometimes referred to as the hunter's pot, and it would hang over the fire, and any passerby or anyone that was coming into the inn could get a scoop of this broth from this giant pot. And it was never emptied. People would continue to throw bones in and the leftover scraps and veggie scraps and ends of carrots and peels and things like that into the pot so that it was full of different nutrients. People would come in and they'd be able to sip on that and feel nourished and warm. It would heat them up on a cool day. So this was a tradition throughout time. In the 12th century, a famous physician wrote extensively on the therapeutic qualities of broth. He very strongly believed that chicken broth could cure asthma and leprosy. Now, the claim for leprosy has yet to be proven, but the key ingredients in chicken broth were ultimately shown to be anti-inflammatory and to assist with respiratory illnesses in a study done in 2007 by the University of Nebraska. And there are many other studies that look like this too. Bone broth actually does do some of these things. In the 1700s, the first ever restaurant opened in Paris, and the sign on the door said this: "Come to me, all of you who are labored in the stomach, and I will restore you." And guess what that restaurant served? Restorative broth. They were aiming at the workers in Paris that were at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. They were working hard, they needed quick, easy, strengthening food, and bone broth was just the thing. In fact, the word restaurant comes from that place, and it actually stems from the French word for restorer. So it was restoring the body, it was restoring the gut, and that is how we got the word restaurant, which we all eat at now, and many restaurants definitely don't restore our health. Lewis and Clark were known to have carried hundreds of pounds of animal bones on their journey and would continuously make bone broth when they would go out on hunting expeditions. That's what kept them and their crew healthy and nourished, that they could explore and could find all of what is now the west side of America. So really, the stories could go on, but bone broth links us to our ancestors, to our past, to our grandparents, and to much further back than that. The stories kind of give us a glimpse into this superfood, into a way that helped us not waste animal products, and it provided a lot of vitamins and minerals for the body. But it also reminds us, when you hear these stories, that maybe it's a tradition that we've kind of forgotten about. It's something that we take for granted in modern times. Nowadays, a lot of soups and broths and things like that, or stock, come pre-packaged. You can buy them in a can, or you can buy them in a little bouillon cube for flavor. But the truth is most of those are made with MSG, which is not nutritious at all. Very few of them are actually made from animal products, healthy, pure food. And so that's something that's really important that has transitioned over the past several decades, and that I'm really hoping people start going back to how our ancestors were eating to at least some extent, and with this food in particular. Now, before I get into more of the scientific evidence and things about bone broth, I really have to clarify something. This is like a big disclaimer for everyone. If you are going to use bone broth or consume bone broth, I need it to be pasture raised or grass fed or organic or wild. Do not get bones from a factory farm or from an animal that you don't know where it came from, okay? Because you are literally going to be consuming the bone marrow and the nutrients and all of the things that are in the bones of this animal. And if that animal grew up in a horrible factory farm and was given antibiotics and chemicals and pesticides and who knows what else, probably what's inside of their body and in their bone marrow is not healthy. And I don't want you to be exposed to that. So I really need you to pay attention when you're looking for bone broths. There are some that I'll talk about at the end that are pre-packaged. I only ever recommend ones that I know how they source their bones. I know how they make everything. So we will talk about that a little bit too, but that's really important to me. So now we can kind of get into why bone broth is a superfood. How is it that this thing can heal the body? Well, people and nutritionists and doctors all over the world have used bone broth at different times throughout history. And even now, many other countries turn to bone broth when people have gut issues or that people are anemic or not getting enough protein. They will turn to bone broth first. Here in the United States, it's kind of gone by the wayside unless you talk to an acupuncturist or a naturopath or a nutritionist. And really, it's starting to pick up a little bit more of momentum. In big cities, there are a lot of like broth bars or like broth coffee shops where you can drive through and pick up your bone broth for the morning. And I'm really hoping that that starts to become a bigger trend. Now for bone broth, I want to read through a list. And honestly, I had like 3 pages of all the things it could do and I had to narrow it down. So I'm going to read some of my favorite things of how it can help the body. And you can always do your own research too. Bone broth helps heal leaky gut and digestive diseases. It repairs joints and bone tissue. It improves hair, skin, and nails. Some people joke that it's nature's Botox. I've heard this so many times and I think it's hilarious. It also alleviates acne. It promotes fertility, improves digestion and the absorption of other foods. It's great wellness support during pregnancy. It strengthens the body before surgery. It helps heal traumatic injuries and wounds. It can provide serious relief for autoimmune diseases. It can help with weight loss, reduce inflammation, improve hydration, and restore electrolytes within the body. It provides nourishment during palliative and hospice care for people who aren't able to eat, but they can still drink. Bone broth is so nourishing. Lastly, and one of the most important things that I talk about with bone broth is that it can improve your mood, your brain health. It can reduce symptoms of brain-related illnesses like depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, anxiety, and so many others. How in the world does bone broth do all of these things? Well, the ingredients that make up bone broth are incredibly important. So bone broth in it has cartilage, collagen, gelatin, bone marrow, amino acids, vitamins, and minerals. These ingredients are healing to the body and provide specific nutrients for different organs. So for example, the cartilage and collagen in bone broth provides healthy skin, right? Like we said, one of the benefits is healthy skin, nature's Botox, right? That's because there's so much collagen. Also is great for joint health. People who suffer from osteopenia, osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, bone broth can be a great addition to daily or weekly routine to making sure that you're getting those extra nutrients to support the body. The bone marrow in bone broth contains something called myeloid lymphoid cells, which are literally the building blocks for our white and red blood cells. So it helps boost the immune system. It aids in clotting blood if you're someone that has really thin blood, and provides oxygen to cells. It can also ease digestion, relieve inflammation, especially with things like IBS, gluten sensitivity, or other digestive issues. There are a lot of amino acids in bone broth. One amino acid in particular is glycine. This has actually been proven in many scientific studies to help enhance the quality of sleep, okay? Doesn't mean if you drink it in the morning that you're gonna get sleepy, but it means that when that amino acid is prominent in the body, that you naturally will sleep deeper and have just like a better quality of sleep. So that's a fabulous reason to drink it. Additionally, drinking a cup of bone broth enhances your body's ability to absorb and assimilate vital minerals and nutrients. So that means if you're taking your supplements from us and drinking bone broth, you're actually getting more of the nutrients from those supplements. So basically, bone broth is magic, and you all need to start drinking it, okay? It's crazy. It's seriously amazing. Another thing that I really wanted to mention, originally I didn't have it written down, but I know there's a lot going around right now with all these scary viruses. People are really concerned. Bone broth is a pretty cheap and effective way to keep your immune system healthy and to help prevent infection or to lessen the symptoms of infection. So you know how grandmothers always want to make chicken soup when you're sick? There is something to that. Use bone broth to your benefit during this season of cold and flu or different infections like right now with the coronavirus. Turn to bone broth. Make bone broth at home, you guys, and start consuming it. Even if it's just a little bit every day, it's gonna help your immune system so much. Okay, so now I really wanna show you how I make bone broth and what that looks like, and just talk about different ways to incorporate it into your routine, because I know some of you are very adventurous and are open to trying bone broth, even if it's just in its natural form, and some of you maybe need to trick yourself into trying it and like tastier ways, and that's fine. We're gonna cover all the bases and make sure that you guys are all happy. So first I wanna show you that to make bone broth, really all you need is a pot or a crock pot or a pressure cooker. For this video, I'm just using a pot so that I can kind of show you what this looks like. If you're using a pot, you will be using the stove. Obviously a crock pot you can plug in, and a pressure cooker is a lot faster because the pressure's in there, but there are so many ways to do this. Also, what you're gonna need is water, ideally filtered water, and then you're gonna need some bones. So today I have some pork neck bones that I'm gonna be showing you. So these I get from a local farmer. They're pre-packaged, and I think that this is 2 pounds of bones, which is perfect because I usually, when I make a batch of bone broth, I personally tend to use about 2 pounds of bones, maybe sometimes 3, unless I'm doing something like a big old stock pot, then I'll use up to 5. When you're looking for bones, and we'll post this resource for you, I want you to look at your health food store, talk to local organic farmers or farmers that do pasture raised. You can also look online. There's a lot of different resources out there. White Oaks Pasture, it's fabulous. There's a website, I think I wrote it down. I'll look, I'm gonna post it. But you can actually look and see who nearby is a pasture raised farm, who's an organic farm. Can you get bones or meat products there? You can also talk to your local butcher, but I want you to just make sure that you're asking, do you have pasture raised bones in the back? And sometimes they'll say yes, you never know, you'd be surprised. So we have these bones. If I were in my kitchen, I would cut this open. They can be frozen or thawed. It doesn't matter. Sometimes if I'm in a hurry, if I gotta use the frozen, it's not a big deal. So I would cut this open with some scissors. I would put my bones right into the bottom of this pot, okay? And then what I would do is I would take my filtered water and I would fill up to cover the bones. So I'm not gonna fill it all the way to the top, because if it starts to simmer, it's gonna spill over. But I'm gonna fill it pretty close to the top. And my little secret is I always put a little pinch of salt, and I put a tiny little bit, like 1/4 teaspoon of either apple cider vinegar or lemon juice, or you can just squeeze a little bit of lemon in there. But the acid, if you add just a tiny bit of acid when you're doing your bone broth, it helps pull out more of the nutrients from the bones and gets it into the actual broth, and I absolutely love that. Why wouldn't you add it, right? So that's really simple. So let's say I put my water in, got my little bit of salt and apple cider vinegar. I'm gonna set this right on the stove burner, and I'm gonna turn it to like in between low and medium. And I'm just gonna leave it there. I want it to start to simmer. I know everyone's stovetop is different, so just use your best judgment or look online if you need some more like visual ideas on what it should look like when it's simmering. But I just let it simmer, and after it's been simmering for about an hour or 2, I'll turn it even a little bit less. Like I do it really low and slow. On the stove, I usually keep it going for 12 to 24 hours. So yes, you really have to trust your stove if you're gonna do that, or you have to start it right away in the morning and make sure you're gonna be home all day and keep an eye on it. That's why it's much easier to do it in a crock pot or a pressure cooker. In a crock pot, I usually do 24 hours. If I'm feeling really adventurous or not feeling well, I'll do 48 hours, but that's not necessary. If you're doing it in a pressure cooker, usually it takes about an hour and you get about the same result as if you did like a 24-hour bone broth. So there's lots of different ways to actually cook it. Now, once this has cooked through, right, literally all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ladle my bone broth into, I prefer mason jars. I like glass. I don't want you to put your bone broth into a plastic container that then when it's heated up is gonna leach plastic into your body. That's no good. Choose ceramic, stainless steel, glass if you can. And there's a couple of tricks. I will put this right in the fridge and then I will use that as my bone broth for the next week. If you make a big batch and let's say you have a couple mason jars, which is very normal, I'll maybe keep 1 in the fridge or 2 in the fridge, and then I will put 1 or 2 in the freezer. I do freeze in glass, but if you do that, it has to be completely room temperature. So right now this is kind of warm. I would not put this in the freezer. I have to get it to where when I touch it, there's no warmth. Then I can actually put it in the freezer. If you freeze in glass, you have to have the plastic, BPA-free plastic lids. I don't recommend at least freezing with the metal lids on. I've heard stories. I've never had any issues doing it this way, okay? But you can do it how you want. If you prefer different types of containers, that's fine too. In the fridge, your bone broth will last anywhere from 5 days to 2 weeks, depending on how much fat there is. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but there's a nice layer of fat on this. So when I put this in the fridge, it actually creates like a seal onto the liquid. And that's great for me because let's say I put 2 of these in the fridge, one I'll start using, the other one's gonna last for about 2 weeks because no air, no germs, no yucky stuff is gonna get through that big, lovely fat layer. In the freezer, it will last for 6 to 9 months. So it lasts a really long time. It's awesome. I'll pull it out, thaw it out, and add it to one of my dishes, okay? So you have questions about that, feel free to comment, contact us, look online. There's so many fabulous resources now for bone broth. There's like actual cookbooks on Amazon for different ways to do it. I prefer my very simple way. If you would like to add vegetables or scraps, or some people add eggshells for extra calcium or herbs, you can do that too. I prefer doing mine plain so that I can do whatever I want with it. I can use this in a sweeter dish or a more savory dish. I can use it depending on what I'm making that day, as opposed to if I did this and it was like rosemary and ginger in here, I'm kind of limited to what I'm using it for because those tones of the ginger and the rosemary are gonna be in that broth. All right, awesome. So how do we use bone broth on a daily basis and incorporate it into our lifestyle? There's lots of ways. You can literally use it for breakfast because it's packed with protein and energy boosters. So I know I've got my dad on bone broth. He's been doing it for a couple of years. He wakes up every morning, he heats up a little bit, he puts it in a mug and he sips it. He makes his taste like chicken soup or beef soup because he likes that savory flavor. It's very simple. He heats it up and then he drinks it before work. He loves it. I know other people who don't love that flavor or don't want to necessarily start their day that way. That's okay. You can take it as a snack. So instead of eating a granola bar, you could have a little cup of bone broth, or we can incorporate it into other foods. So you can use bone broth to make soups, stews. You can mix it into your mashed potatoes. If I splurge and decide to have a little bit of like basmati rice, I will cook it in bone broth instead of water. That's a benefit for my body because now I've added protein to this rice and it's easier to digest, it's easier to assimilate and to get those nutrients, and you don't have like the crash because with any kind of complex carbohydrate, it kind of breaks down basically into a sugar, and sometimes it can spike people's blood sugar. Well, when you make it with broth, it's much more even keel. It's a little trick that I like to do if I'm in a splurge and have that. Same goes for mashed potatoes. You can add some broth to that. You can add it to applesauce. You can cook with it in so many different ways. I love to add it to my chili. We'll make mashed cauliflower and add it to that. If I cook burgers, sometimes we'll put a little bit of broth into the bottom and into the burger. You can make it into like a gravy and put it on top. So if you remember, like back in the day, everyone had gravies all the time. Those were usually made from bone broth, and most likely they were used so frequently because they helped people digest food. Okay, it's so simple. If you want to get really crazy, you can look up, there are actual mixed drinks with bone broth. So I know in the 1950s there was actually a bone broth hot toddy that was vodka, bone broth, lemon, and spices like hot sauce and cayenne pepper. I can't say that I've tried that, but hey, if you're feeling adventurous, go for it. I also know moms that have turned bone broth into gummies. They've mixed it with different berries or elderberries or different things, and then they get like those gummy molds on Amazon and turn them into gummies. You can do so many fun things, you guys. Like, I honestly could go on and on and on. So we're gonna be posting a couple of my favorite recipes. I have like a sweet potato and apple recipe that I love that we mix with bone broth. It tastes like Thanksgiving. It tastes so good. I've got simple, just the plain old broth. I have a bone broth latte. It's not actually coffee, but I mix it up and it has that frothiness that tastes like a latte to me. It's so soothing. I put ginger and cinnamon and a little honey in it. It is to die for. So there are so many ways. Look it up, be adventurous, explore. And if you have questions about bone broth, don't hesitate to call us. Or if you're curious about how to heal your gut or how to eat better and make better decisions, contact us. You don't have to just be in Florida. We are more than happy to work with you virtually and to talk you through healthier eating and to give you recipe ideas. Maybe you're someone that suffers from anxiety, or maybe you're someone who suffers from IBS or colitis or Crohn's. We can heal your gut. We can do that. I worked with so many patients, you guys, who have healed themselves by adding nutrient-dense foods that are cheap and simple, like bone broth. Okay, so do not hesitate. Give us a call. Comment, let us know what you think about this, and I really want you guys to try this. I want you to try it out and let me know what you think of it. And if you're coming to one of our workshops, I want you to maybe show me a picture or send us a picture of what you made with it. Get creative, don't be afraid, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to give me a call. All right, thanks so much.